The Midnight Violin, in the home of Sherlock Holmes, 221B, Baker Street. Rain whispered softly against the windows. Sherlock Holmes plays a haunting melody on his violin. Dr. Watson sat nearby, reading the evening paper, when suddenly there was a frantic knock rattled at the door. Mrs. Hudson rushes upstairs. "Mr. Holmes, there's a gentleman insisting he must see you immediately." A tall man stumbled into the room moments later. His coat was soaked from the rain. "My name is Julian Ashcroft," he said breathlessly. Holmes lowered his violin. "And what tragedy has brought you through this dreadful weather, Mr. Ashcroft?" "My brother, Daniel Ashcroft, was murdered tonight at Blackwood Manor." Holmes' eyes sharpened. "The famous music estate?" "Yes. My brother hosted a private dinner there tonight. Only 5 guests were present, and yet someone among them became a killer." Ashcroft nodded. "The room was locked." Holmes smiled. "A locked room murder." Watson groaned softly. Holmes stood immediately. "Watson, fetch your coat." Blackwood Manor stood like a sleeping giant beneath lightning-filled skies. Inside, Daniel Ashcroft lay slumped over the grand piano. Watson examined the body. Blood traced down his temple. Blunt force trauma. Holmes scanned the room carefully. No weapon. Inspector Lestrade stepped forward. "We've questioned everyone." Lestrade gestured to the suspects gathered nearby. 1. Clara Whitmore, a renowned violinist. 2. Professor Edwin Blackwell, a music historian. 3. Thomas Bellamy, Ashcroft's business partner. 4. Margaret Doyle, the housekeeper. 5. Julian Ashcroft, the victim's brother. Watson whispered. "All 5 were inside when he died?" "Yes," Lestrade said. Holmes walked around the piano. Something caught his eye. A single violin rested nearby. Holmes lifted it. "Did one of you play tonight?" Clara Whitmore stepped forward. "That would be me." Holmes nodded slowly. "And while you played, Mr. Ashcroft died." Holmes studied the piano. Then he noticed something odd. The music sat open, but the notes were wrong. Holmes whispered, "Curious. This piece cannot be played." "Why not?" Holmes tapped the notes. "They are written backward." Lestrade frowned. "What does that mean?" Holmes smiled faintly. "It means the victim left a message." Holmes questioned each guest. "Clara Whitmore." She spoke calmly. "I was performing when the lights flickered." "Did you stop playing?" "No. The room was dark for only seconds." Holmes nodded. "Professor Blackwell was discussing Beethoven with Mr. Bellamy. They never left their chair. But Mr. Bellamy and Ashcroft argued earlier tonight. Business disagreements. Margaret Doyle was serving wine, and Julian was beside his brother at the piano." Holmes' eyes lingered on him. Back at Baker Street, Holmes studied the sheet music again. Watson paced. "Surely the message points to the killer." Holmes nodded. "Yes." Watson leaned over. Holmes rotated the page. The musical notes now spelled letters. Watson read slowly. "B-E-L-L." Watson gasped. "Bellamy." Holmes stared at the page. Watson frowned. "You're not convinced?" Holmes whispered. "Something is wrong." The next morning, Holmes returned to Blackwood Manor. He stood at the piano, a faint scratch in the wood. Holmes smiled grimly. "Oh, how clever." Watson arrived moments later. "Have you solved it?" Holmes nodded. "Yes." That evening, all suspects gathered again in the manor. Holmes addressed them. Daniel Ashcroft was murdered during the musical performance. He turned to Bellamy. "The sheet music appears to accuse you." Bellamy shouted, "Someone framed me." "Indeed." The room fell silent. Holmes turned slowly. The music message was fake. Gasps filled the room. Watson blinked. Fake? Holmes nodded. It was written after the murder. Everyone stared. Holmes turned. To the real killer. He pointed. Julian Ashcroft. Julian laughed nervously. Absurd. Holmes walked closer. You killed your brother. Why would I? Holmes spoke calmly. Money. Lestrade held up documents. Holmes continued. Daniel recently changed his will. Julian's face paled. Holmes finished. You were being removed from the inheritance. The room went silent. Holmes explained. When the lights flickered, you struck your brother with the violin. Clara gasped. The missing violin. Holmes nodded. The missing weapon, you mean? He pointed to the instrument. A crack hidden in the wood proves it. Julian backed away slowly. You can't prove it. Holmes smiled. Oh, but I can. He lifted the violin. Inside was a faint smear of blood. Julian collapsed into a chair. Later that night, Watson sat with Holmes. Well done, Holmes, Watson said. Holmes played softly. But then, Watson asked, Holmes, something still bothers me. Holmes didn't look up. What is it? You said Julian wrote the false message. But how could he? The lights were out for a few seconds. Holmes slowly set down the violin. Excellent observation, Watson. Watson stared. What are you saying? Holmes walked to the window. The truth is, Julian didn't write the message. Then who did? Holmes turned. The killer did. Watson blinked. But you said Julian. Holmes interrupted. I said he struck his brother. Watson froze. Holmes finished quietly. Then someone else planned the murder. Watson whispered. Who? The person who arranged the music. He looked toward the chair where Clara Whitmore had been sitting earlier. She used Julian as the weapon. Watson gasped. She's the killer? Holmes nodded slowly. Exactly. You could slightly hear that violin melody through the night. Clara Whitmore had vanished, and the true mastermind had escaped.